evening, members. Are there any apologies to present this evening? I'll take Councillor Redfern's apology first.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to give apologies to Councillor Russell, Higginbotham, Khan and Councillor Ramjames. I'm afraid I'll be late.
Thank you. Councillor Atwell? Thank you. Councillor?
Councillor Long-Williams.
Thank you. Item 2, are there any declarations of interest on tonight's agenda?
Mr. Mayor, we can't hear you over here.
Have the technicians acknowledged that? Is that any better, Mr. Tickling? There's nothing I can do here. The microphone's on. Can the technicians have a look at the system, please? I'm tempted to say, can you hear me now, Mother? But, yeah. Can we just check with the public gallery if you're on the back row? Could you wave? Thank you very much. Okay. Item 2 then, to receive declarations of interest. I see none. Item 3, to approve the minutes of the meeting of the Council held on the 15th of December 2011. Those in favour? Those against? It's agreed, thank you. Announcements from the Mayor. I have the unpleasant duty of reporting to you 5 deaths recently. Barbara Garner, Mayoress to Cyril Ufton in 1975, passed away at the beginning of January. Ed Szynski, who sadly passed away in December after a struggle with cancer. Ed was an advisor in our HR section until his retirement, but he continued to undertake work in a consultancy capacity for a short while. And Beryl Randall, Jean Morton and John L. Birring, who were all Civic Award winners. May I ask members please to stand for 1 minute silence? Thank you very much. I now have 2 welcomes. Firstly, welcome back, Councillor Turner. Glad to see you with us tonight, and we hope your recovery continues apace. Thank you. And a welcome to Katie Harris, Service Director. That's taken you by surprise, Katie. Katie is our Service Director in CYP, but standing in tonight for Andrew Bunyan. Item 5, to receive any statements from members of the Council Cabinet. I believe there's only one from the Leader.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Since the last meeting of the Council, I'm pleased to advise members of the following initiatives and achievements. Members will know that the Council has been giving cross-party support to Bombardier in their efforts to secure work for their Derby site. The announcement of their success in winning an order for 130 Electrostar trains for Southern Trains, valued at £189 million, is great news for the company, for Derby and for UK rail manufacturing, and is proof that our efforts in respect of the Bombardier campaign are paying dividends. We were also delighted to announce just before Christmas that we had secured a significant investment into the former Egg call centre on Pride Park by Hero TSC, an international company whose Derby client will be Sky TV. We pledged support to the project from our Regeneration Fund, and by doing so secured over 700 jobs for Derby, with the prospect of more to follow. Our customer service facility at Albion Street opened again between Christmas and New Year and was a great success, providing a wide range of services. Over 5,000 customers use the services at Albion Street, which represents a significant increase on the same period last year. And another service which opened for the first time over the Christmas period was the autism service at Aspect. A total of 7 customers and carers chose to use the service during the 2 days. Providing this service enabled customers to maintain their routines and rituals which are most important to them in their lives, and it gave carers a taste of what the benefits of having choice and control with a personal budget can actually do for people to meet their outcomes and personal aspirations. Following the launch of the designs for the multi-sports arena, initial feedback from stakeholders has been extremely positive. And the designs for the multi-sports arena can be accessed on the planning pages on the council website. On the 23rd of February, we'll be opening the refurbished Joseph Wright Gallery at the Museum and Art Gallery. This opening is a brand new presentation of one of the most important art collections outside London, and all members have been invited to this opening, and I hope that they'll take the opportunity to attend. Members will also be aware that at the end of last year, we offered staff the opportunity to leave the organisation on voluntary redundancy. 330 members of staff left at Christmas, and a further 33 members of staff managed to secure alternative posts. To enable us to deliver a balanced budget, we expect to have to make up to 20 posts compulsorily redundant, which is significantly less than many other councils are having to do. And the number may well up being significantly less than even that. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all those members of staff who have left the organisation for their hard work and service to the council over the period that they worked for us. And finally, Mr Mayor, I'm delighted to announce that we've been ranked number 26 in the Stonewall Top 100 Employers, a jump of 12 places from last year, and in the top 5 performing local authorities. We've also won a Stonewall Star Performer Award for our LGBT employee network. This is excellent news for the Council and confirms our commitment to equality and diversity in the workforce. Mr Mayor.
Thank you. We'll now move to item 6, but before...
Point of order. Am I allowed to laugh?
You are, I apologise to you.
I continue, Mr Mayor. Firstly, Happy New Year and Happy Burns Night to everybody here. In terms of the comments made by the leader on Bombardier, there's no doubt that Justine Greenie and the Conservative government have got the message regarding our fighting for the rights of people in Derby to have Bombardier on their doorstep, to be here delivering good services and building trains in Derby. As the last manufacturer of trains in the UK, there's no doubt that government seems to have got the message. I certainly think it's also important to recognise the fact that at Christmas, and the Council has done this, people don't always stop. There certainly needs to be support services across the Christmas break, and I think that things like Aspect reflect that. In terms of the multi-use sports arena, used to be called the Velodrome, we are where we are with that. It'd be interesting to see what announcement we can bring forward in terms of the swimming pool. Joseph Wright refurbishment, of course, is welcomed across the piece here. Sadly, we have to contrast that with the rejection of our bid for the Arts Council regarding the engine at the Silk Mill. Members of Derby City Council staff are always, in my opinion, those that are the unsung heroes of this organisation. Certainly, we owe them a debt of gratitude, both the ones serving, the ones that have recently left us, and, as we've just a few minutes ago, given tribute to some that have passed. In terms of Stonewall and the 100 Employees Award, it's nice to see that the Council is yet again leading by example on this, and it's something we should be proud of. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. We will now move to item 6. Before we do, I have a brief statement to read to you. Members, you will recall that at our November meeting, we resolved to change the way we deal with questions from the public and non-Cabinet members to Cabinet members. This evening is the first occasion the new scheme will be used, so I'll take a moment to explain how things should work. Questions and responses to the questions have been collated and published in advance to save time previously taken reading out both the question and the prepared answer. The questions and answers are in the document which everyone in the room should have sight of. The same document has been published on the website. This advanced publication enables us to concentrate on any supplementary questions, and I will ask each questioner in turn if they have a supplementary and invite them to the microphone to ask it. Can I remind questioners that any supplementary question must relate to the answer received from the original question? I hope this is clear, so we'll now proceed through the 9 questions from the public, beginning with Mr. Titley. Mr. Titley, have you had time to read Councillor Skelton's response?
I have indeed.
Would you like to put your supplementary then?
Supplementary, please. Yes,
Thank you.
thank you. Mr. Mayor, can I infer from the answer provided that in fact the ruling groups have no real or particular interest in providing this service, and I'm looking for a reassurance for the Cabinet member that I'm wrong about this. So my question is, am I wrong, Cabinet member Councillor Skelton, that you are not interested in providing a service in the longer term as an authority, and in fact by reducing the numbers of employees within that vital service to the elderly and the vulnerable of home care, and that's what the question's about, the original question, what you're actually doing is slicing this service up like the Conservatives have done on so many occasions in the past.
Mr. Titley,
and
Mr. Titley, I must stop you. Mr. Titley, I must stop you and remind you that you are asked one supplementary question. It's not an occasion for a speech.
OK then, Mr. Mayor, the question is, are you going to outsource this service by 2p to the private sector? Because that's what the Conservatives have done in the past, and why won't they do it now?
Councillor Skelton.
Right. Good evening, Mr. Titley. I think I will take a little longer also in giving a reply than just a few words. You have to go back about 10 years to when, well, it will be longer than 10 years, when all of home care was actually delivered purely by in-house staff. About that time, a decision was made to as and when new people came into the service, to put those packages of care with the independent sector, and to, over the years, gradually change the percentage split between those packages that were delivered by in-house and those packages that were delivered by the independent sector. And over the past 10 or more years, that has the proportion done by the independent sector has grown, and the proportion done by the in-house service has shrunk. What we did do, I think in about 2008 or 9, was make a decision that the enablement service would be done solely by in-house providers. So that is the situation as it is. I think that gives a clear answer to that.
Thank you,
Thank you, Councillor. Can I have a question, supplementary question from Ms. Skrytek? Can I remind you, Ms. Skrytek, that it's a question, it's not a speech?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. By the way, there's no other place I'd rather be thrown out of. There's an error in the answer, Mr. Mayor. Electrical goods are no longer taken by the furniture project.
Is that the question about the
No.
error? Well, can we have the question,
Now,
please?
how can the City Council prove to the inquiry inspector that they follow the definition of sustainable development, i.e. leaving resources for future generations, reusing, recycling, saving those resources, if the play and recycling centre and the furniture project will be gone, so the inspector will not be able to visit them and see sustainable forms of waste management?
Councillor Poulter.
Good evening, Dorothy. Thank you for the supplementary question, but I don't think it's, the question is actually relevant. I can't see that the inspector, as you're referring to, will have the time, ability or the inclination to look this deep into this type of initiative. The bottom line is that if these two organisations do not receive continuing funding, during the course of development of a joint municipal waste management strategy with the County Council, we will be looking to promote and engage and develop such initiatives and funding throughout the county. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Ms Attenborough, would you like to put your question? Come forward to this microphone in the corner, please, Maggie. There's one in that far corner, if you wouldn't mind.
Can you hear me, Mr. Mayor?
We can, but that looks uncomfortable for you.
Thank you. I'm representing the group Steps for the Future, which is a performing arts group for adults with learning disabilities covering Derby and Derbyshire. My question that I submitted was, why wasn't Steps for the Future considered to do the performance work on the day of the Your Life, Your Choice event that was here in the assembly rooms? A group was brought down from County Durham to do this work, and they were paid a sum of $1,200. My question is, the fee paid to Movable Feast was $1,200. This money went to a group whose hometown is County Durham. Does not the council think that this amount of money should have gone to a local group who have experience in working with the council? Thank you.
I think that's been answered, but we'll ask Councillor Skelton to say it again.
Is that it then? Shall I go back?
You can stand where you are until the question's been answered.
I think really it does give the answer. Movable Feast were obviously chosen for their particular pieces of drama that they produce. There was obviously Steps of the Future did perform as well. Obviously we can only say, obviously if you're upset about that, we are sorry. As officers have already said, you know, I can't really add much more to that, but obviously we will work closely with your organisation in the future.
Can I respond to that?
I'm afraid you can't, Ms Attenborough, because you're only allowed one supplementary question. I will say before you go that I've been to one of the performances of your group and it was excellent, and I recommend everyone else to attend as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Mr Bacon, could we have your question to Councillor Poulter, please?
Good evening. I'd just like to complain about the fact that you're taking away my rights to ask the question verbally, but I suppose that's the decay of Derby City Council. Before I ask the question, can I ask Councillor Poulter, I've got to remind him from the last public questions to prove...
Mr Bacon, the rules are quite simple. You put a supplementary question to the answer that you have printed. Can we have the question, please?
But how do I get updates from the last meeting from him when he hasn't replied? Right, I'll ask the question.
Is that the question?
No.
Yeah, I've got a different question.
I'll give you the question now, thank you. Right. £2 per bag is the cost price of the product in question. My council tax pays for the site's operation. Therefore, my taxes subsidise the sale of this product, directly destroying local business. How can this be acceptable at a time of great hardship in the retail sector?
Councillor Poulter.
Good evening, Simon. I take issue whether it's your taxes that's subsidising this, because the price of this material that's distributed through the Mini Centre is not in any way subsidised by the council. The operator is required to sell it. They are required to sell it at a price that they take the risk on and they take any profit from. So the council has no direct influence at this point over the price that they charge. But that's not to say that we won't continue to monitor this initiative, which is an excellent one and should encourage Derby users to use recycled products from our own recycling initiatives. And if necessary, we will review with the operators the charges that they the prices that they charge.
Councillor
Thank you, Councillor. Can I call Councillor Underhill to put his question to Councillor Holmes?
You're undercutting local business. You take my job away.
Evening, Mr Mayor. Evening, councillors. In response to Councillor Holmes, to my question, is there a current list, please, Councillor Holmes, of the sites of the tubes? Is that available for public to see? And then also that the existing tubes that are in locations where the road has gone totally, are they being removed as well?
I can certainly get that detail to you if it's publicly available. If it isn't, I'll ask for it to be made publicly available and sent to you. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Can I call David Gale to put a question to Councillor Hickson?
Good evening, Mr Mayor. It's unfortunate that Councillor Hickson chose not to respond on the issues relating to scrutiny and governance in his response, but let's just for one moment suppose that he had. Can Councillor Hickson explain to me, and this is just one example, why on the 27th of September I witnessed a Cabinet meeting approving the procurement of a document management system at a cost of hundreds of thousands of pounds, the implementation cost of which will run into millions of pounds, when a number of senior officers and members in that meeting were already aware of the existence of a best-of-breed entire site licence for a product called Meridio, a document management system that's used by the US State Department and the Ministry of Defence. And why has the Council tolerated a libellous smear campaign against me in defence of its IT strategy?
Mr Gale, our monitoring officer wishes to intervene. Thank you.
Mr Mayor, in regard to the last comment made by Mr Gale, that is not a proper question. He'd been warned in advance that we wouldn't take any questions that were defamatory or offensive. If the leader wishes to respond to the first part of that question, that's legitimate.
Down to you, Councillor Hickson.
Well, Mr Mayor, the position is that the Council and its officers and me have spent a considerable amount of time and effort considering and responding to Mr Gale about the development of our IT strategy, as I said in the original answer to the question. I'm satisfied on behalf of this Council, and I understand that goes as well for the leader of the opposition group, that the current ICT strategy is an appropriate one, that there are good and legitimate reasons for departing from any previous strategy, and that the Council has robust governance arrangements in place to manage and monitor the delivery of the overall transformation programme. Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Mr Titley, you have a supplementary to Councillor Poulter on a different matter?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Would Councillor Poulter agree with me, in my opinion, and this is a question, would he agree with me, that actually what we're reading here in the answer to when will the investment be made in the refurbishment of Ulverston District Centre? The response is there's no money available. My supplementary is that because the current administration, the Conservative and Liberal administration, actually have no interest in investing in Ulverston District Centre, not least of all because they don't have any sitting members in that ward?
Councillor Poulter.
Good evening, Mr Titley. Can I infer from that that you might be standing in Ulverston Ward? No, I wouldn't agree with you at all. The reason why this scheme cannot be progressed any further is, as you say, as in the answer, the money just isn't there. We're interested in and want to promote the improvement of all district centres, and Mackworth and Spondon and all other districts could benefit from such work. But the truth is that such developments have a relatively minor transport benefit compared to other mainstream transport schemes. And under LTP3, it's been essential that we've had to focus mainly on maintenance of our highways, to maintain the roads, remove the potholes, and wherever possible, improve the road surface for all road users. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr Bacon, would you like to put your question to Councillor Holmes?
Good evening, Councillor Holmes. Noting the response in the document this evening, and irrespective of what the Inspectorate has stated in recent weeks, the date of June the 12th was put forward first by the City Council, ignoring availability already put forward by Rule 6 parties, who are fighting to uphold your Planning Department's decision at no cost to the Council. Why did the City Council take such steps which will clearly weaken the defence of your Planning Department's ruling?
Councillor.
Thank you, Mr Bacon. Well, quite clearly, all aspects of this issue are going to be considered by the Planning Inspectorate in due course. We've got to respect that process, and the City Council and others will no doubt be called upon when the time comes in front of the Inspectorate, and as he sees fit, or her sees fit, she sees fit. That process is ongoing. It's got to be allowed to take its course and to draw its conclusion.
So you've not answered the question either, because I asked you why did you do it first.
Thank you, Mr Bacon. Question from Colin Underhill. Have you a supplementary to Councillor Jones?
Councillor Jones, on seeing your response to the question about the library hours, the comment about not conflicting with the MLA guidelines is that on Section 2 it does state that hours to be extended and consider people. But my question is that you're saying that there's going to be a consultation exercise will be conducted in the autumn to see if the new opening patterns introduced need to be fine-tuned within the budget. But the people that cannot go to the library because of the new hours will not be able to respond to the consultation because they'll be excluded. So how will they be monitored?
Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Mr Underhill. I'm not quite sure why anybody would be excluded, because if we do a consultation, and I'm hoping to do it before the autumn, allowing the library enough time to bed the new hours in, but to bring it forward from September to perhaps July. It will be widely publicised on websites, and I would hope that we would have coverage in the press and the media, so it would give everybody the opportunity to respond fully. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks for that.
The next question is a councillor question to... Oh, sorry, yes, we've got item 7, questions from Derbyshire Police Authority, Derbyshire Fire Authority, Derbyshire Homes. There are none. So we now look at questions from councillors to cabinet members. Councillor Graves, you have a question directed to Councillor Williams, but as she is not present, the leader will take the question.
Yeah, we can't hear, Mr Mayor.
Could you just wait a moment, Councillor, till we try and get this... Are we back online? No, it doesn't sound like it. No.
Has this got anything to do with the information technology question?
Sure it has. Are we back on? Yes, we are. Is yours working?
I think that's working now. No, I'd just like to thank the Cabinet member for a good answer. And the fostering services will be pleased within the City Council.
Thank you, Councillor. That's the end of the questions, and we now move to item 9 to consider the following minutes and recommendations of the Council Cabinet, dated the 10th of January 2012, requiring the approval of the Council. The motion is as written. Those in favour? Those against? And that's carried. Item... We've gone again? Are we on again? Item 10. Consider the following minutes and recommendations of the Audit and Accounts Committee dated the 1st of December 2011, requiring the approval of Council. You see the motion as written. Those in favour? Any against? That's carried. Item 11, to consider a report of the Strategic Director of Resources relating to a revision of the Employee Code of Conduct. Those in favour? Those against? That's clearly carried. Item 12, to consider a report of the Scrutiny Management Commission relating to the Council's governance model and ethical framework. This motion was going to be put by Councillor Higginbotham, but as she's not present, we've invited the Vice Chair, Councillor Harwood, to propose the motion, and I propose to take each one separately.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the absence of the chairperson, Councillor Hickenbottom, it's my... I'll be gone. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me over there? Right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the absence of the chairperson, Councillor... Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the absence of the chairperson, Councillor Hickenbottom, it's my remit tonight to put forward this motion for your acceptance. The Scrutiny and Management Commission has debated the particular items with considerable discussion, and I would like to forward those motions to you, Mr. Mayor, for your indulgence. Thank you.
The first motion is to retain the current... Sorry, we have to seek a seconder for that. Councillor Bayliss, is that... Right. Is there a seconder? Thank you. Motion number 1, retain the current political management system with the strong leader, cabinet and overview and scrutiny model. Are there any speakers to that motion? Go to the vote then. Those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Item 2, to amend the Council Constitution to ensure that the chairing of Overview and Scrutiny Commission is reserved for opposition members. Is there any speaker besides Councillor Bayliss? Councillor Bayliss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I won't be very long. I just wondered whether to start with this as admission of defeat by the members to my left, because in 99 days' time there's an election. But the substantive point is this. I think 3 years ago, the Liberal Democrats decided to support the Tories and took all the scrutiny chairs at that point in time, didn't share them at all with the Labour group. I just think it odd that you should propose that as an amendment to the Constitution tonight. I also point out that this is actually potentially flawed. I remember a time past where there were 44 members on this council and the Labour group had something like 39 of them, in which case some sort of recommendation like this would actually be unworkable. Thank you.
Councillor Hickson.
Well, Mr Mayor, the answer to what Councillor Bayliss says is that this was a cross-party supported recommendation to this council, so I'm surprised that he raised it. The Labour chairman of the Commission put it forward, supported by the Labour members in the Commission, and it was agreed by the Commission, so we're merely responding tonight, I think, to the Commission's recommendations. These haven't come from the Cabinet.
Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. As a member of the ONS Commission, I would refute what Councillor Hickson said, and it was made clear, at least by 2 members of the Labour group on the Overview and Scrutiny Commission, that we would be opposing this. And it was after some discussion that it was moved, seconded and agreed, but we had declared a minority position. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I don't see any other speakers, so we'll go to the vote on item 2 as written. Those in favour? Those against? That's clearly carried. Thank you. Item 3, to adopt a local code of conduct and retain a standards committee with its current composition of 4 independent and 3 elected members. I don't see any speakers, so we'll move to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? That's clearly carried. Item 4, to ask the Scrutiny Management Commission to conduct a review of the Council's current electoral cycle and make recommendations based on that review. I don't see any indication of a speaker, so we'll move to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? That's clearly carried. Item 13. Councillor Shanker to move and Councillor Banwaite to second. Councillor Shanker, would you like to move your motion?
I'm sorry, Councillor, we'll have to start again with it.
Mr Mayor, there's a number of other speakers on this motion. We've had more depressing news about the economy recently. I'd just like to reiterate what I said back in November. This is an important motion for the communities of Derby. It's a motion that just calls for this council to lobby ministers for a position on VAT which will enable many depressed families and give them a bit of relief in hard economic times. And I'd urge the whole council to support this.
Councillor Banwaite, are you seconding? Are you speaking now or reserving? You reserve the right, thank you. I understand Councillor Repton wishes to speak. Councillor Ashburner.
Mr Mayor, fears that this country's economic output was slowing not only has been realised, but it's far worse than anyone expected. Figures released today have shocked financial experts, with the economy not only slowing, but going into reverse. The economy has shrunk in the last quarter by 0.2%. This demonstrates quite clearly that George Osborne's Plan A simply is no longer credible. It is no longer credible, patently, because it isn't working, but by God it's hurting. It is hurting everybody, but particularly the elderly in the city, the 2.75 million of people that are out of work, and the lost generation of 1 million unemployed under 25-year-olds. On Monday of this week, Oliver Blanchard, the chief economist with the IMF, in a clear message to our government, urged, quote, Britain has to have the flexibility to promote growth, indicating and nudging this government to take urgent and positive action. With nearly 3 million people out of work, staggering increases in the cost of food, gas, electricity, petrol and train fares, there will be no growth unless George Osborne and the Tory-led coalition changes courses. It makes sense, therefore, for this government to show a tiny glimmer of humility, admit that it's got it wrong, and consider urgent and immediate measures to address the problems identified by the IMF, that is, lack of growth. An immediate but temporary reduction in VAT would help every hard-pressed and squeezed family in this city and in this country. It would provide the much-needed stimulus the economy is crying out for and would lead to growth and to jobs. It would, as importantly, give hope where currently there is none. I urge Council to support this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Ashburner.
The recent rise in VAT, this proposal is peripheral to the economic problems of this nation. People are concerned by their future employment, not a few pennies on their dual purchases.
Councillor Ashburner, could I ask you to lift your voice a little? People at the back are saying they can't.
Right. This proposal is peripheral to the economic problems of this nation. People are concerned by their future employment, not a few pennies on individual purchases. I deal with several stockists who noted no significant changes in consumption with previous VAT changes, suggesting that consumers also regard this as peripheral. We need to keep the interest rates that we collectively pay down to affordable levels. The recent rise in VAT will reduce the rate at which our collective debt will rise and persuade organisations like China and India that if they give us lenders money, they will get it back. The interest rates paid by us collectively dropped when Labour lost their last election and were replaced by the current government. It is this sort of irrational financial policy that is proposed by Labour that will decrease confidence and increase the interest rates which we collectively pay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Campbell, please.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. As I said last time, VAT has always been a poor tax that affects the poor more than the rich. Those on lower incomes are forced to spend a high percentage of their income on surviving, where those on higher incomes can afford to save. It may only be a few pennies to Councillor Ashburn, and that may not make much difference to him. I assure him there's many people in this city who a few pennies make a great deal of difference to.
Thank you. Councillor Khan, Farhatullah Khan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Of course, everybody's affected by the VAT rise. We have to remember that there was an initial rise by the Labour Party that took VAT up from 15% to 17.5%, and I'm sure there was a reason behind that. And there's a reason behind this as well, and the reason surely is to put the country back on track. We talk about fairness in tough times. What did the Labour Party give back to the UK economy? Not a lot. 75 pence rises in pensions. Not a lot, really. £4.50 was given by this administration last year, and £5.30 is pledged in the coming year. In addition to that, a lot of the poorest workers in this country have had their tax threshold risen to £10,000, so that takes a lot of pressure off the poorest in this country. We hit the bankers with £2.5 billion in taxes. What did Labour give them? Nothing. Labour gave the country back nothing. Nothing to recover the economy, even in these tough times. What did they do? They even scrapped the 10p tax rate for the lowest paid workers. So I wouldn't urge my group to support this motion at all. Thank you.
I don't see any more speakers, Councillor Banway, so if you'd like to come to the microphone.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My comrades in the Labour group have made all the key points about this and put forward a very robust argument why we believe that this motion should receive cross-party support. And for us, Mr. Mayor, this is about changing course. Clearly, this government came into power with an economic plan. And the statistics, the record of this government since they've been in power, to be frank with you, Mr. Mayor, is diabolical. Their economic plan has failed, with unemployment rocketing 2,600,000 as it stands now, which is an 18-year high. The economy shrinking, the economic plan has failed. And this Labour group, this Labour Party, is in business to provide an alternative. And I must come back to this point we've made before. We have a very strong mandate. This is a Labour group where more people voted than both the Liberal Democrats and Conservatives put together. So they would achieve some degree of respect in this chamber and amongst the electorate of Derby if they actually started to listen to this Labour group in opposition just a little bit more. Labour's five-point plan, Mr. Mayor, and that's worth reminding, Councillor Shanker put it forward at the last meeting, is a £2 billion tax on bankers' bonuses to fund 100,000 jobs for young people, to bring forward long-term investment projects in schools, roads and transport, a one-year national insurance tax break for every small firm which takes on extra work. And, of course, this motion is about the VAT part of that strategy. A reduction in VAT will help stimulate retail spending. A reduction in VAT will help stimulate the construction industry. And it has actually proven an economic strategy of stimulating economies across the globe. It's been tried and tested before in bringing more money into the economy. And I come back again to this point that, irrespective of the points that have been made about the record of Labour, unemployment wasn't as high as it is now under Labour. More people were in work under Labour than are now under this unholy alliance of Conservatives and Liberal Democrats. So there is no comparison. In fact, Mr. Mayor, you would be forgiven to think that we are back to the dark old days of right-wing Thatcherist policies. In fact, Mr. Mayor, they make Margaret Thatcher look quite calm in comparison. And the fact is, Mr. Mayor, these are right-wing policies. It is harshness and cruelty to continue to take a course which actually jeopardises the future of ordinary working people in this country. And the people that are refusing to change course, and I'm not talking about my colleagues in this council chamber here today, I'm talking about the likes of George Osborne, Nick Clegg and David Cameron. People who were born rich. People who have absolutely no clue of the pressures affecting ordinary working people in our city. And may I remind people who saw the news, when George Osborne was asked by a journalist, did he know of anybody that had just lost their job? He did not even bother to answer, which suggests, no, he doesn't. That's the world he lives in. How can we expect somebody like that to actually make decisions that impact on people in our city who are feeling the pressure, as my comrade, Councillor Martin Repton, has pointed out? But one thing is for sure, Mr. Mayor, if I look across this council chamber, I do look at colleagues, comrades in this council chamber that are from a cross-section of Derby, that I would like to think can share in the heartache and the burden and the pressures on families. Perhaps they know a family member, a relative who's lost their job in the last few months. So I appeal really to all of you. This is not about party politics. This is about common sense. If something isn't working at the moment, and we've tried this for nearly 2 years, we've got to change course and try something different. And to be frank with you, we're not trying to dismantle your whole economic plan, so you're not going to be disloyal to your bosses in London, David Cameron and Nick Clegg. What we're asking is an element of economic strategy which has proven to work in the past. So what I will say, Mr. Mayor, that we're not asking you to adopt this Labour plan. We're asking you to adopt a common sense plan. And it can be, if it needs to be amended, I'm sure we could certainly consider that within the Labour group. And there are many, many ways to achieve what we want to do, to press...
Sorry, Councillor, your time is up.
To press the government, to press the senior politicians to change course. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I've had two indications since you started to speak, Councillor. The first one, Councillor Hickson, and the second one, Councillor Roberts.
Well, yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think just a few sensible points need to be made after hearing some of that nonsense. The first is that what is the Labour plan as far as financial management is concerned? Because if Councillor Banwaite knows it, perhaps he ought to be sharing it with Ed Miliband, because clearly he doesn't know what the financial plan is. First he wasn't in favour of cuts, now he is in favour of cuts. First he wasn't in favour of reduced public spending, now he is in favour of reduced public spending. So you really need Councillor Banwaite to get a grip, because it seems to me that there is absolutely no national policy, as far as the Labour Party is concerned, about fiscal management in this economy, which is in a mess, because that's the way that Labour left it. The bottom line is that we have a fiscal deficit which has to be managed. And we're not going to manage it by tinkering around with things like VAT, because if we reduce the tax intake from VAT, then we'll have to increase the tax intake elsewhere to make up for the shortfall. That's common sense. You don't need to be a brain surgeon to understand that point of view. The free-for-all with bankers, let me remind Councillor Banwaite, didn't happen under a Conservative or a Liberal Democrat administration. It happened under a Labour administration. The mess that we got into and the generation of the fiscal deficit that was caused by the free-for-all from bankers, where they were allowed to run riot in the city and gamble with our money, putting our futures at risk, was at the behest of the Labour Party in power at the time, who wouldn't impose any controls on bankers or any controls on the financial institutions in the city. So I don't think we need to learn any lessons from the Labour group about fiscal management and economic policy. In the fantasy island of Labour economics, the answer to everything is to spend more, irrespective of the consequences. And I think the public have got tired of that particular argument. They understand now that the spend days of Labour are over. They want sound economic management of public finances, both in this city and across the country, and that's what they're getting. And I think the clear indications are from the public that they, whilst they're unhappy with some of the consequences of that, are completely satisfied that at last somebody has got a grip of what Labour let get completely out of control.
Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I just deal with what Councillor Khan was talking about in his history lesson of who put VAT up? Can I just remind him that maybe if you're a bit older you might remember, but Mrs Thatcher doubled, in fact she more, well, you want history lessons, brother, you can have them. Mrs Thatcher increased VAT from 7% to 15%, more than double. And it wasn't the Labour Party who increased VAT to 17.5% from 15%. It was John Major. So you've got it all wrong. So I might just dismiss the rest of what you said, because it's based on a false premise. And when you start quoting history, make sure that you've got your facts right, because there's people on this side of the House who do know what they're talking about. Now then, let's just deal with Councillor Hickson's rather grandiose statements about fiscal management by the Conservatives that's leading the way to the highest deficit we've ever had. And when Alistair Darling had the temerity to say to the Conservatives that he had a plan to get the deficit down in 4 years, George Osborne said, "Rubbish, I can do it in 2 years. And I will show you how, because I'll increase all of the taxes and I'll make cuts all over, and I'll do it in 2 years." Yesterday, and the facts are there to support this, yesterday the highest deficit we've ever had, and George Osborne's predictions of when we'll get rid of this deficit or reduce it to the level he said is actually 5 years. Now, isn't that amazing that Councillor Hickson can come here and say the Tories have got the fiscal management of this economy right, and yet his own spokesman, his Chancellor of the Exchequer, rubbished Alistair Darling's figures on 4 years, and yet now he is going to take 5. I think we need to look at some of these things. And the other thing that Councillor Hickson said, that we somehow mismanaged the banks. Well, let me just remind you, Councillor Hickson, that it was your beloved Mrs Thatcher who deregulated the banks, not the Labour Party, not even the Lib Dems, because nobody would take them on as supporters at the time. But the fact is, it was the Conservatives that deregulated the bank, and that is the thing that's led to the downfall of the banking system. So don't ever come to this council and tell us that the Labour deregulation of the banks caused the problem. We didn't deregulate them. I will say this, I don't think that we managed them as well as we should. We should have taken regulation back and made it clear to the banks we wouldn't accept what they were doing. But we didn't. But don't say that we deregulated them. Your lot did.
Can't see any other indication, Councillor Shanker, so that gives you the right to wind up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was going to start by paying tribute to the Conservative group. At the last meeting and earlier today, they'd not spoke on this motion, and that's probably because they absolutely believe in having VAT at these record high levels. It's a tax, as we've heard, that hits the poorest the hardest, and it's something they probably believe in. We knew they'd do this before a general election, and they did it. It's not a surprise to us. What is a surprise is how Nick Clegg was telling us about the Tories' VAT bombshell, and I would have thought the Liberal Democrats could have supported this. I think Councillor Roberts has explained to Councillor Khan his facts are wrong, and maybe he'll take a lesson from that and in the future come to this chamber with his facts checked out. Councillor Nater, Councillor Atwell, did you want to speak? The Mayor invited you a number of times at the previous meeting on this motion to speak, and you decided to stay on your seat. Does he? Oh, sorry, I thought you wanted to speak. Sorry, Mr. Mayor. No, I'm not deaf, actually, no. But there is people who are deaf. Councillor Nater. Councillor Nater got up last time and told us why he couldn't support this motion. He said he couldn't support it because it was part of the coalition agreement. Well, I don't think that's a strong enough reason not to support this motion. Councillor Nater also told us, as a businessman, and I didn't think that was the reason why he was here. I thought he was here to represent his residents in Blaegreaves. He told us as a businessman he thinks nobody's noticed the difference on VAT and businesses absorbed the VAT increase. But I don't see that happening in Tesco's. I don't see that happening across petrol forecourts across the country, and in Derby particularly. Councillor Skelton, she tried giving us a lesson on economics, and I've got to admit, I listened to her contribution several times last night, and I still can't make out what she was trying to tell us, so I gave up in the end. This motion, as I said, I didn't expect any support from the Conservative group. I expected the Liberal Democrat group to support a motion which is purely asking them to lobby government ministers for a temporary reprieve on VAT. A reprieve which isn't a few pence, as Councillor Ashburn has told us. It's £450 to a family with children. That's a considerable amount of money. It's a considerable amount of money which will make a real difference to hard-pressed families. I still, at this late stage, urge all members to support the motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. We'll move to the vote. Those in favour of the motion, please indicate. For those against the motion? For 19 against 27, the motion is lost. Motion number 2, Councillor Skelton, would you move, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to start by just giving a few background details. The report, as people will know, the Dilnot report was published last July, and there were 3 commissioners who worked on that report. It was chaired by Andrew Dilnot, who was an eminent economist and broadcaster. Joining him were Dame Jo Williams, who is the current chair of the Care Quality Commission and has also had lots of experience working in local government and latterly in local government as a social services director, both at Wigan and Cheshire County Council. And also Lord Norman Waller, who's a Labour member of the House of Lords and sits on the Lords Select Committee on Science and Technology. He's a former health minister and also formerly a social services director at Kent County Council. So an eminent group of people. The job they decided that they needed to do, obviously being given their remit by government, was to try to create a care and support system which, as far as possible, built for the long term, was fair to everyone, offered people choice, was good value for money and easy to use and understand. Now, currently the government spends approximately £14.5 billion each year on adult social care in England, and about half of that is spent on older people. Approximately 1 in 4 people at the age of 65 will actually spend very little on care costs for the remainder part of their lives. Half of people at age 65 can expect care costs of less than £20,000 for the rest of their lives, and the remaining quarter will experience costs above that. And within that group of people, approximately 1 in 10 at age 65 will face future lifetime care costs of more than £100,000. Interestingly, the average care costs for men at age 65 is £25,000, and for women £44,000, obviously reflecting the fact that women tend to live longer than men. The thing that is, I think, the crux of the matter is that none of us know which of these categories will fall into, which means that it's very difficult to plan for the future, which is why, of course, there is a market failure with the situation with insurance. Basically, you cannot get insurance to cover you for those costs. So the key findings of the Dilnot report were that, unsurprisingly, that the current system, which I think it was basically devised in 1948, is not fit for purpose now and is in urgent need of reform. Also, the current system is confusing and it's unfair to people and it's unsustainable. And a major problem is that people are unable to protect themselves, as I mentioned earlier, against very high care costs. Most people, though, are realistic about the need for individuals to make some contribution to the costs in later life, but they do want a fair way of sharing those costs between themselves and the state. So the main recommendations were that to basically protect people from those extremes of care costs, there should be a cap brought in for lifetime contributions, so that, and it should be somewhere between £25,000 and £50,000. Dilnot Commission themselves decided that £35,000 would be an appropriate figure, and that's what they based their modelling on. The means tested support, they say, should continue as it does now, so that nobody who currently receives their support by state subsidy should lose that. In fact, people should, with this report's recommendations, more people will be able to get state support. Also, those people who at the moment are either born with a social care need or develop a social care need earlier in life, the Dilnot Commission recommend that they should get free state support for their needs. the benefit system as well needs to be better aligned with the reformed social care system, because at the moment there is a great deal of complexity and it doesn't sit well together. People also should be prepared to pay for their general living costs, whether obviously they do, obviously when they're still living in their own home and receiving social care support, but also when they're in residential care. Also, the eligibility criteria, which at the moment are decided authority by authority, it's felt that that should become a national level. Also, to encourage people to plan ahead, there does need to be a lot more awareness raising done by government, and they should develop a proper strategy for making people aware so that then they can prepare for their future care costs. Also, carers as well need to be better supported so that they also get the entitlements that they need. They should get assessments done as well by right, because obviously if carers are not properly supported, and that is patchy across the country at the moment, then that often leads to a breakdown in a caring situation, which means that the state often has to step in. I think also what needs to be said is that the amount that this would cost would be, if there was a £35,000 cap, would be £1.7 billion a year. It sounds a lot of money, but actually it's only about 1/400th of total public spending. And I feel, as do many other people, that that would be money very well spent, because if there was also an insurance industry able to respond by bringing products onto the market, that would actually bring a lot more money into the care sector, as well as the money that the state already puts into the care sector, which would be beneficial in terms of standards of care and the amount of care received. There wouldn't be this mismatch between demand and supply. So I would just like to encourage everybody to support this motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Nater, do you want to second now or reserve the right?
I'll reserve the right, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Winter is not present, so Councillor Nater is seconding on her behalf. Councillor Banwaite?
Mr Mayor, what complete hypocrisy by Councillor Skelton. This report talks about support for vulnerable people who are vulnerable because of their age, disability or mental health. But let's just look at the record of Councillor Skelton in this area. Under Labour, home care was free. What did Councillor Skelton do when the Liberal Democrats took control of this council in 2008? They scrapped it. And let's look at their record under care homes. They've tried continuously, firstly in power on their own, and now as part of a coalition, to close the last remaining care homes in this city, Merrill House and Warwick House. So that's how much Councillor Skelton cares about the vulnerable people in this city. And it's complete hypocrisy for the Liberal Democrats now in coalition to come shrouding this report, that they need a report to show and express that there are clear issues and pressures facing vulnerable people in this city who are of extreme age or have a disability. That's exactly what Labour has been doing when they ran the council, and that's why we introduced free home care. What they should have done, Mr Mayor, when they took control of the council, is actually build upon that. And if they wanted a cross-party consensus on that, I'm sure that could be achieved. So for Councillor Skelton to come and peddle this civil service report, a commission, to promote it as if it's suddenly the dawn of some civilization, that, you know, she's suddenly realised something that's great and she needs to push forward, is absolutely disgraceful. And in fact, Mr Mayor, that shows complete incompetence to the people of Derby, and she should do the decent thing and resign. Thank you.
Councillor Roberts.
Mr Mayor, I can confirm I have seen the amendment and it is acceptable. If you'd care, I'll read it out, Mr Mayor. It's just additions to the end of the motion, and it reads, Council, however, notes with regret that the Chancellor, George Osborne, has already sought to change the basis for total life care limits from 35,000 to 60,000. Council therefore agrees that the letter to the Prime Minister will emphasise our support for the maximum limit to be set at the rate proposed in the Dilnot report.
Would you like to speak to it now, Councillor Roberts?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This is a fairly simple amendment that seeks to clarify our support and firm it up a bit. I wouldn't have any difficulty in supporting the main motion. I do, however, think that before the ink was dry on the Dilnot report, the Chancellor came in and said that the upper limit for expenditure by anyone on care would move up from 35,000 to 60,000. I thought that Dilnot had probably pitched it about right for people, but what we're seeing in our own care homes, in our own city and county, is that those people in what now is referred to as the squeezed middle are having eventually to come to councils for care because their total income has been assessed, and once it falls below £25,000, they then have to fall back on the council for care. However, there is no upper limit on how much that can be, and that is patently unfair that one person is asked to pay a great deal more than another in that respect. Now, I don't mind progressive taxation in an open and proper way, but I think this is a kind of progressive stealth tax in old age for people. It really is quite unacceptable, and Dilnot has actually clarified that and brought it to a reasonable standard. Some people would say £35,000 is far too great, but with properties and so on nowadays, and people popping a few bob in from redundancy payments, they may be able to afford some levels of care, and that choice has been there for people to make that additional payment as self-funders if they wish. But I noticed just the other week that another example of the attention that seems to be paid now to people who've saved a few bob is a different kind of application. And there was a man who went to an appeals tribunal and lost his case. And I accept to some degree that it might have been interpreted as a vexatious case. But the judge at the tribunal, quite unusually, said that he must pay the employer's charges in the appeal of £5,000, and that was because he had savings of £60,000. Now, you might think, why is Robbo standing at the front talking about people with £60,000 and having to pay out? Which is rather unusual for me. I don't mind soaking the rich. It was me and Dennis Healy, I think, who wanted to squeeze the rich until the pip squeaked, but I hadn't got any money then. Anyway, I still haven't, but you shouldn't worry about it, you know. But the issue is fairly simple to me. Here we have a man who, for some reason or other, has £60,000, and another man at the tribunal who could have had exactly the same case. He would have paid nothing, but somebody said, you've got £60,000, so you've got to pay. Now, where is the equality in that? Where is the fairness in that? Where is the fairness that says, if you've got property, and I have to look at this now and say that most people I know with families want to try to leave their children with something, and all they'll be trying to do now is avoid this at all costs, and we'll see another raft of legal mechanisms to try to take people out of doing it, just in the way that everybody's been rushing to write these wills that leave things in joint names and in trusts, and there's all sorts of fiddles going on around it. The more money you've got, the easier it is to fiddle it. Ask Ad al-Nazir, or should I not mention names like that? Mr. Leslie is going to frown at me now, but you know, if you've got money, you can go live in Cyprus for 30 years and avoid all the pain, and then come back and say, I'm sorry, and can I have my delayed knighthood, please? But there you go. This is, as I say, a simple amendment, and I do think what it is firming up Dilnot's proposals and saying we don't want George Osborne to put those limits up because we think they're fair. If this council thinks that those limits are fair, I would ask them to support it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Do we have a seconder for your amendment? Councillor Hussain, do you wish to speak now?
Mr. Mayor, as Councillor Roberts indicated in his contribution, my group is going to support this motion regardless of whether you accept our amendments or not. But we feel the amendment is actually quite sensible, and it has been written with a view to strengthen the existing motions, because there is a real chance that the recommendations, as they are set out in the report, might not be accepted. And I think, first and foremost, Dilnot Commission did a presentation when I went to Adult Services and Children's Services Conference back in October. And the first thing he said was, I had full regard for sustainability and affordability of my report. I looked at whether this country can afford it, and I am satisfied that this country is able to afford it, and he gave full facts and figures. It's not really possible for me to go through all the facts and figures here with you. And the second thing was sustainability, and he was equally satisfied that the country will be in a position, despite the financial difficulty at the present time, that the country can actually afford to adopt the report in full and implement it. So I hope that the Liberal Democrats and the Tories will actually accept the amendment. Dave Roberts and Councillor Skelton have actually gone through some of the facts with you, and I'll mention some more. The 100,000 contribution which some people have to make towards their care is actually unfair. And if you look at who actually ends up paying this 400,000, and it's not usually your super rich, it's the squeezed middle which ends up paying, because they end up, most of their wealth is put in their property, and then when both partners are in a home, they have to pay from the sale of the property towards their care, and they end up leaving nothing for their children or their grandchildren. And I think it is unfair, extremely unfair, to put them in that situation. So limiting lifetime contribution to 35,000 is actually very sensible, and as I say, according to the research which Dilnot Commission did, they thought it was also affordable. The other figures which really come to mind, according to DWP research, 11 million people will live to be 100 years out of a total population of around 60 million who are alive today. So you can see all the people who are alive today and breathing today, something like 11 million people will live to be around 100. And you can see the pressure that will generate for social care unless we did something about the situation that we're in today, because social care is actually in crisis. And it is something that has been overlooked for a long period of time, and I think Dilnot Commission has given us an opportunity to bring it higher up on the agenda, and we need to do whatever we can, exert pressure on everybody concerned to make sure that the recommendations are actually adopted in full. Just to give you, just to compare what has been invested in social care compared to how much money has been given to health department, since 2004, £25,000 million has been given to health authorities generally, in recognition of the fact that people are living longer, people have got complex healthcare needs. Social care has not been given much. Compare that £25,000 million with £43 million. That's all that social care has had in those years. Now, if you look at that, I mean, social care and health care, they haven't got a very clear boundary in that sense. There's lots of overlapping. And when the times are hard, which some of the health authorities are doing now, they're passing over, they're shunting over some of the care costs which they've traditionally picked up for, they're shunting it towards social care. The other thing, a survey was carried out by Care and Sport Alliance, and it showed that 24% disabled people had their services cut in 2011. 24% of disabled people had their services cut in the last year, despite the claims that additional money has been given to social care sector. It is clear that we can afford the care, and despite the politics of everything, I urge you all to actually support the amendment and then the motion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Very well timed. Councillor Dinser.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For too long, social care has been a Cinderella service to health and other funding. And over many, many years, there's been a constant eroding of the funding compared to the need, which has grown as more and more people live to an older age, and medicine enables more people to survive to a more fuller life. So the Dillner report actually pulls together all the issues and actually puts forward a very sensible way forward. And Councillor Roberts' amendment, I think, gives more emphasis to the Dillner report and makes it much clearer to anybody who may be not so clear about this, that everything in the Dillner report is to be taken seriously. And the upper limit is a very critical factor in terms of making sure those who are in the middle or lower income, they can benefit from this facility as much as anybody who's well off. And that's the issue that I think Councillor Roberts has highlighted with the amendment. The general thrust of the report and the resolution is very much similar to where Andy Burnham, when in the previous Labour government, tried to form a consensus, a cross-party consensus, on finding a way forward in terms of how we deal with social care and the needs of adult individuals in our society. Because we should work together, cross-party, in this chamber and in government, to ensure that we give the best facilities and funding within the constraints of the economic climate to ensure that the services available and the social care available is up to the level of the need. Too long that has not happened because there's been party politics and there's been movement one way or the other. We need to get that out of the way. We need to focus on this Dillner report. And I hope that everybody can support the amendment, because I think it makes it much clearer that we are here in support of those who are middle to lower income families, as well as those who are better off than them. So this will give a very good, strong message that we support a cross-party consensus in delivering better social care services for members of our society, but at the same time we are mindful of making sure that some members do not get discriminated or lose the opportunity to benefit from these recommendations once they are formed into an implementation plan. Thank you very much.
Councillor Ashburner.
Very simply, Mr. Mayor, we normally have written versions of amendments so that we have a clear view of what's being voted on. This isn't the case in this case here. So could we have the amendment read out again before we come to a vote? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
can do that, Councillor.
Just to make that clear what the position is, Mr Mayor, on amendments, all they have to do is be submitted to you in writing. Though it's been our practice to circulate them, there's no requirement that's done, and where they're fairly straightforward, we won't always do that, but I'll certainly read out what the amendment is. So there are words, these are words that are added to the end of the motion, and they say, Council, however, notes with regret that the Chancellor, George Osborne, has already sought to change the basis for total life care limits from 35,000 to 60,000. Council therefore agrees that the letter to the Prime Minister will emphasise our support for the maximum limit to be set at the rate proposed in the Dilnot report.
Councillor Skelton.
I'm quite happy to emphasise the need for the £35,000 to be the limit. So, personally, I'm quite happy with Councillor Roberts' amendment.
Can't see any more speakers. Those in favour of the amendment indicate, please. Against. Those against, please. For the amendment 23, against the amendment 15, the amendment is carried. The amendment is now the substantive. Are there any more speakers, or do we move to the vote? Thank you. Those in favour?
Councillor Skelton is going to speak again.
Thank you. You can speak again, Councillor Skelton.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just to say, I hope that everybody still can feel that they are able to support the motion. I'd like to thank Councillor Roberts, Councillor Hussain and Councillor Dimser for their comments. Sadly, Councillor Banwaite let the side down, but, well, that has to be expected.
Those in favour, please indicate. That's clearly carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to motion number 3 from Councillor Carr to move, Councillor Truplin to second.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and good evening, everybody. This motion is fairly self-explanatory, but it's in support of targeted and tailored 20-mile-an-hour zones where they are really needed. It's not a blanket implementation across the whole city. 20 is plenty. Many other cities have introduced 20-mile-an-hour limits in their city centres since the Portsmouth scheme began in 2007. And in Portsmouth now, the new lower speed limit applies to all vehicles at all times and a high, but not all, percentage of the city streets. It's not enforced by cameras or road humps, but relies on drivers being sensible. Taking into account people with less serious injuries, overall road casualties in Portsmouth fell by 22% after the scheme was introduced. So reducing traffic speeds, Mr Mayor, on our streets is the single biggest measure that will make them safe, vibrant and social places. If you are hit by a car at 35 miles an hour, your chances of survival is about half. If you are hit by a car at 20, your survival rate leaps to almost 100%, 97% in fact. So a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit increases road safety, it gets more people walking and creates more social streets, and it cuts pollution from exhaust fumes. It smooths traffic flow and it reduces traffic noise. It can be done, as I said, without the use of costly and complex traffic calming measures. Many areas are now looking at adopting 20 mile an hour on all roads where people live, work and shop. I think doing it wholesale is probably a step too far for Derby and needs much more detailed consideration. But as a first step, and as the motion states, I am asking Council to underwrite its intentions to plan the bringing in of 20 mile an hour speed restrictions on residential side roads where this has local support. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Tuplin, are you going to second now? Or?
Right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So Derby's got numerous residential roads where the traffic flow is hampered by parked cars and other restrictions. Many drivers, including myself, reverse from the property onto the road and are often unable to see oncoming traffic until the last minute. How... I do go to Specsavers, thank you. I'm not deaf. How often have we arrived at a bend? I do almost every time I go one way out of my street to be met by a car head-on approaching me, but is overtaking a car parked at the side of the road. If I drive at more than 20 miles an hour, I would almost certainly have a head-on collision. Now, what about children? Even the best-behaved children are frequently unaware of the dangers of traffic, and they are particularly vulnerable if they emerge from between parked cars. Drivers need to be able to stop quickly to avoid injury. So I did look up some facts. I actually worked out the first one myself, but the kinetic energy of a car, a one-ton car travelling at 20 miles an hour, is about 4,000 kilojoules. But if you increase the speed to... I'll wait. Yeah, okay. But if you increase the speed to 30 miles an hour, it's about 9,000 kilojoules. That's more than twice as much. So the stopping distance is obviously going to increase as well, so I looked that up. At 20 miles an hour, the stopping distance is about 12 metres, but at 30 miles an hour, it's almost doubled at 23 metres. And then if you look at the chances of a pedestrian being killed by collision with a car, at 20 miles an hour, it's about 5%. But put it up to 30 miles an hour, and it's about 40%. So that's 8 times as much, just by increasing the speed by 10 miles an hour. So when members are deciding on which way to vote, I hope they can remember and use those facts. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
An indication from Councillor Holmes before Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have an amendment to this motion, if Stuart Leslie can put that forward, please.
Mr. Mayor, I can confirm that an amendment has been received and it meets the requirements of the procedural orders. It's quite a substantial change, so we are going to circulate copies of it now. And while they're being distributed, I will give you a summary of what has been proposed. If you were to look at the motion as set out on page 3 of your papers, it starts there. Councillor Carr moved, Councillor Tuplin to second. Council, then the first paragraph is virtually the same in the amended one. The second paragraph, bullet pointed, is pretty well taken out. The third bullet point paragraph is taken out, and the fourth is changed substantially. So it will read, in its amended form, Council welcomes recent changes announced by Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State for Transport, Norman Baker MP, to reduce time-consuming, costly bureaucracy for councils wanting to introduce 20-mile-per-hour speed limits. Council encourages and supports
Members, could we just give a little bit of order while the monitoring officer is reading the paper, please?
Council encourages and supports neighbourhood boards across the city continue to identify their local priorities and consider the implementation of the 20-mile-an-hour limits as part of the package of measures available to improve road safety, and therefore request the Cabinet Member for Planning and Environment and Cabinet Member for Neighbourhoods to consider introducing the preliminary work necessary to take advantage of the changes announced as part of the Government's Traffic Signs Policy Review.
Is there a seconder to that amendment? Thank you, Councillor Harwood.
Councillor Poulter.
Could I just ask Councillor Carr if he's prepared to accept the amendment, or is, are we going to go to a debate on it? Thank you. Shall we move to the vote? Those in favour of the amendment, please indicate. That's clearly carried, so it becomes a substantive motion. Faratullah Khan, you don't need to speak anymore. Councillor Bayliss, yes, it is Kevin.
I won't detain you too long, Mr. Mayor. I mean, the motion to start with was odd. That I know Councillor Carr is quite passionate about 20-mile-an-hour speed limits, but he is a cabinet member after all. And it was a bit of a shame that he didn't go and talk to Councillor Holmes before, because Councillor Holmes always says his door's open. Sadly, he might not be there very often, behind his desk, behind the door, but he says the door's open. I do think that this thing sensibly should be determined locally by neighbourhood forums and boards, which is the amendment that's been tabled. But it doesn't really make sense that we have like before, we have a cabinet member bringing a motion to council, and last time it's clear in their portfolio, this time it's not, but they haven't had a conversation with their alleged colleague, who then has to sort them out. It just makes a farce and a mockery of it. Let's be honest, it's just the headline for the Focus magazine. Shall we get on with this, Mr. Mayor? Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak? You want to sum up, Councillor Carr? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, there's a couple of points. It's a shame that Councillor Bayliss has such a mean-spirited attitude. However, I can tell him that I have tried to talk to Councillor Holmes, who, as he says, is never there. And when he is... and when he's at work, he's got a Faraday cage around the hospital, so the mobile phone never, ever works either. It's tactics to prevent me intercepting him. I'll just leave you with one point. Most of the research in the UK indicates that for most of the UK, it is about 600 metres to the nearest exit onto a traffic route. This means that the difference in time between 20 mile an hour and 30 mile an hour to get you onto a traffic road is 20 seconds. Do you think 20 seconds is worth a child's life? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
We'll go to the vote then. Councillors, those in favour of the substantive motion, please indicate. That's clearly carried, thank you. We move on then to the final motion, number 4. Councillor Hillier to move, Councillor Dinser to second.
Okay, the Family Intervention Programme was originally set up in 2007 under the management of Derby Homes and funded by government monies and grants. And this provided intensive support and focused challenge to the high-need families, especially those with chaotic lifestyles, impacting on their ability to manage their day-to-day responsibilities and successfully parenting their children. Also, this impacted on neighbours and the communities in which they live. The project works with the family to bring stability to their lives and prevent homelessness. And I want to sort of focus on this aspect of preventing homelessness because that's one of the key success indicators. It doesn't move families, it tries to prevent families from being evicted, thus reducing costs in eviction and keeping families where they are and concentrating on keeping the children in school, improving their health and well-being, improving relationships, reducing the risk of poverty and increasing social inclusion. And they've done this by really the effectiveness of multi-agency working. Over the years, they've had many challenges to face, and as a result, they've developed this model of multi-agency working, which is a unique approach. There is also cost benefits. In one example, taking the cost of the input into one of these families into account, dealing with one of these families is still saved on probably around $150,000 a year. And between last year and this year and the year before, since its inception, nearly between £800,000 to £1 million has been saved since 2007. And this has been done by reducing police call-outs, court time and referrals to other agencies. But there have been changes in funding over the years, and the FIP programme have had to sort of look at workarounds as well. Now, this was started in 2007 and it's decreased year on year, but this has been agreed funding that's been decreased. This started with the funding for supporting people. This ended last year with a cut of $96,000 to the budget. It was also funded by States Pride, which has reduced year on year, and this was reduced. Well, this year it's been $200,000, and now it will be reduced to $100,000 next year. They do have some funding from Derby Homes, but this is not enough on its own. This year it's $90,000 that's been put in there, and $20,000 from housing associations. For 2013 to 14, though, however, FIP only has £50,000 earmarked at the moment, and this is still subject to review. However, since this funding has dramatically fell since 2010, this is despite original proposals since the start of this programme that council should see that funds for this should be sought on an ongoing basis. Widespread cuts from government nationally and locally have undermined that plan, and I believe that changes are in the pipeline to streamline services, but we'll come on to that later. Although the FIP has continued to deliver a quality service, there have been hidden sacrifices by improvising and struggling, and this was meant to be a sustainable growth programme, growing in the number of families it dealt with. If backing had been sustained from the council, the Family Intervention Programme, which I'll refer to as FIP from now on, might have even been reaping more benefits sooner with more families, but instead their progress, although has been positive overall, has been held back in places where it could have jumped ahead. Every challenge they have faced, they have delivered on, but it has been difficult. In the past 18 months or so, they've had to make cuts to 10 or 11 staff. They've had to come up with new innovative new strategies and add value where they can, dealing with the changes in infrastructure and the way they work. And, let's say there are some good lessons here. As a result, they now have developed an excellent model of multi-agency working as it stands. As an example, if anybody from other agencies wants to know what's happening with a family, they will go to the FIP team and they have all the information there. They've got an excellent model of information sharing and the use of mobile devices. And they've improvised a great deal to ensure that families and children are not compromised given the struggles that they've had. It's been hard work, and I applaud the work of the FIP team, but more families could be benefiting. And yet, the challenges have not come to an end. FIP is already stretched and faces the prospect of further change. It's now not just about funding in this area and reviewing again the way they work locally, but now there's the impact on these families from other cuts, from benefit cuts, from public sector cuts, and bringing more families into the framework of vulnerability, and also the impact of other programmes government-wide, which only go to muddy the waters around multi-agency working and the motives behind these. Locally, then, proposals of integrating the FIP team into localities are in the making, and children and young people and social services have been working together on this. This could be good if done for the right reasons and not as a way of saving money or using existing money already earmarked for existing services. I know that locality managers want to embrace FIP, ensuring it continues to deliver a sterling service and built upon multi-agency working. But will FIP still receive the same amount of funding as they have done in previous years? Or instead, will localities and other teams, or will this funding instead still be soaked up, potentially putting a drain on other frontline services and delivery? Changing the structure must be done cautiously, especially if the model of working already works and needs to be strengthened. And there are risks. These risks are the main purpose of this motion. We can't allow the essence of this service to be depleted if adequate investment in strengthening this model and innovating is not there, and in addition, still delivering on other multi-agency services. What we don't need is for FIP to be jeopardised by integrating for the sake of diluting funds and services. So that's local. Government-wide, there are impending changes from other government programmes which could make or break effective multi-agency working. As a result of the riots last year, Cameron announced a £448 million programme to tackle troubled families. These troubled families are identified as having a number of criteria, some of which are sort of low qualifications, mothers with mental health problems, low income. But, however, this will be performance managed and will set against targets similar to a payment by results scheme. This will be set against targets such as the number of children going back to school, the number of antisocial incidences, and the number of parents back into work. Councils have been allocated £20,000 from government to analyse their top priorities for troubled families and where to place these services. And based on these numbers, consider the needs where to expand provision. Apparently, this should be completed by February, and so this motion is extremely timely. Local authorities have then to find funds themselves to deliver against these targets and then only get 40% back. There's therefore a risk that the focus of work may be directed away from the FIP strategies, which may have been key to this, which are key to this day and going forward, and instead trying to reach these targets. Introducing performance measures can only stifle progress and innovation. I know it is said that the tackling troubled families, or I'll refer to that as TTF, save me get my tongue around that, is going to work with families and seems to make sense for what this is. TTF is going to work with families and seems to make sense for this to be embedded in the current work, but with what motive? Will the motives for TTF present a danger of leaving gaps behind those things that FIP have been effective in delivering? It is, on top of this, also stated that councils will get funding to appoint troubleshooters, and which seems sensible to also to be integrated within the work of FIP. But, although similar, again, there still may be clashes between goals. We still need FIP to deliver what it delivers and still target all other families, not just those to reach targets. And we don't want an effective service model being compromised at the expense of reaching these targets. Targets could lead to hard-hit councils to exploit this funding, and it could, as an indirect result, also penalise those families and communities who are at risk of getting left behind. I don't know whether money yet is invested in TTF is to be integrated into FIP or not, and the proposed multi-agency working model. The goals are different, and we don't want to have different roles within teams tackling different aims, bridging similar families, and so forth. It just goes against the principles of FIP. And talking about principles, if you remember, when tackling troubled families was originally sparked by riots, councils and some coalition MPs were even calling for families to be evicted, costing more in the long run. This also exemplifies the most basic social understanding that helped trigger the riots. If tenants are moved into other, often privately rented accommodation and hit with benefit cuts, it doesn't do anything for that family, or more importantly, the children of that family, widening the social divide even more. It doesn't get rid of the problem, it just moves it on. But going back to this TTF programme and the muddy waters it stirs up, together with changes in benefits, and also now we've got the employment support contracts going in, also measured by payment by results. It may only force vulnerable groups into further problems. So, FIP is a unique service providing a shared communication channel and providing a multi-agency model of working. The proposals for this to be integrated in locality teams is not a bad thing, but we must ensure that this is being done for the right reasons and not just to find money, and use existing money for existing services. Otherwise, things will start to fall apart. There's a danger that FIP may lose all the uniqueness and benefits it delivers, but if given the right backing, we can ensure that the model of working will be strengthened and not depleted. We can continue to innovate. As an example, FIP are trying to implement the Triple P parenting programme, one of the only teams in Derby with accredited Triple P parenting practitioners which cover an effective range of interventions specifically designed around the family. Information sharing also needs to be built upon and invested in multi-agency working. So, let's not also forget long-term sustainable solutions which Labour put in place have already been under threat of massacre. We see it now with cuts to benefits and so forth for quick wins which cause more damage in the long run. All these measures have a sideways impact on services and families, and this is why it's more important that at any other time that we must embrace the work of FIP and keep their model and the expansion of that alive and not placed in danger of being diluted. So really, this motion is therefore really to take stock of what's working well and where future gaps may occur given the changes ahead. This motion is also about ensuring we have the necessary mechanisms in place to grasp opportunities that might fall out of scope of the Troubled Families budget and not to forget other areas which may be impacted by these changes. This motion is also to identify funding streams, not just to prop up existing services or fund government targets, but to build on and sustain the good work of FIP as opposed to changing direction and leaving gaps behind. We need to ensure that these local and national funding proposals will not put those most at risk being left behind, ensuring that the Council recognises the good work here in light of wider cost savings to the economy and long-term benefits to the community, reinvesting in this instead of streamlining. And I also want to emphasise we need to ensure that these funding proposals will also not exclude any expansion of work looking at the effect upon other people and families in the neighbourhood who are severely affected by antisocial behaviour and intimidation. We need to ensure that these people are also not forgotten. The remit of FIP is much more diverse than tackling troubled families, and this is why it is effective. This motion is about making sure that future changes do not expose risks and leave the next generation of children worse off. It's already the principle that is supported by professionals on the ground in Derby, and I urge you all to support it.
Councillor Ginzer, are you speaking now or reserving? Thank you. Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have an amendment. I'm taking a leaf out of Mr. Leslie's book. It's very, very simple. All I want to do is to put a full stop after risk in the next to the last line and delete the remaining part of that sentence. So it will just end at risk. No.
You want to speak to it?
Yes, I'd just like to say thank you, Councillor Hillier, for the dissertation, I think it was. I'm sorry, you did lose me at times during that, but I think I've grasped the general theme of what you were saying, and with the deletion of those words, we're prepared to accept that motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Is there a seconder for the amendment? Councillor Skelton, thank you. Do you wish to speak now, Councillor Skelton, or reserve the right?
We all give in. We surrender.
Councillor Hill has accepted the amendment, so we'll now speak on the substantive, if there's a speaker. Councillor Bolton.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I think Councillor Hillier explained the situation very thoroughly and in depth, and it shows the passion that we have on this side of the chamber regarding the FIP project. I know that many families in Chaddesden Ward, where Councillor Campbell and I represent, and if you look at the casework that we're presently dealing with, it does show that the FIP project is actually working tremendously well in our area. I attend the neighbourhood ward tasking meetings on a regular basis in Chaddesden Ward, and that consists of the police, the youth workers, Derby Homes, the actual youth worker in the ward, the housing officers, and FIP is mentioned at nearly every tasking meeting that I attend. And I think if you look, it was under a Labour government that this was instigated, but it's unfortunate that the coalition government are destroying it. But the facts speak for themselves. There was a review done at the end of last year, and if you look at the families they are working with and the issues that they are trying to prevent in Derby, I think every councillor here this evening who are conscientious and do a good job in the ward they represent should support this motion. The issues they've dealt with are helping families with debt problems and helping them claim the benefits, and of course the present government are destroying the benefit system, and this will only worsen the situation in many of the estates in Derby. They've helped with families' engagement, and they've dealt with 36 support reviews over the year. Antisocial behaviour and crime, and I'm sure we all experience that in the wards we represent. They help the police. They help prevent children going into care. And we heard last night at the Children and Young People's Overview and Scrutiny Commission just how high those figures are at the moment. And I'm sure members who were at that Scrutiny Commission last night will actually welcome any initiative that actually reduces the number of children that go into foster care or indeed are adopted. Domestic violence, we know, is on the increase in our city, and I've seen that for myself by attending the vulnerable children's meetings in every locality during the run-up to Christmas. The domestic violence situation in this city is quite high. In fact, it's extremely high. And it's usual that whilst we are in a recession, as we are now, the figures on domestic violence will increase and get worse. They support parenting, and 26% of parents have attended a formal parenting course during the last quarter. They encourage social activities and help through external agencies. The Youth Service and Enthusiasm have been involved in many projects throughout the city. The other initiative they help with is health and well-being, and therefore they do work very closely with the care authorities. And I think if you look at the report that was published, the whole emphasis of this is multi-agency working. And again, this was introduced when we had a Labour cabinet and we had the Area 1 pilot that proves that integrating services does work. I spoke to the head of service today in Area 1, Chaddesden Ward, and he obviously is greatly involved with the FIP project. But he also told me that from April this year, the FIP will be integrated into the locality teams. And I think that is to be welcomed by every councillor here in the chamber this evening. It is hoped that the funding will remain, but as Councillor Hillier said, there is some doubt. The integrated locality services do work well, and we need to keep that going. But without the funding, it will be difficult to ensure that the families we are helping in the city do not fall into further poverty, do not fall into homelessness, do not fall in having their children removed from them, Mr. Mayor. We need to ensure the FIP project is allowed to continue to ensure that the vulnerable families in this city get the help they need. Thank you.
Councillor Rawson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm sure that many members will be aware from their own personal experience of FIP's work within their own wards of the massive benefits brought about by this project. FIP came into being because agencies found a number of vulnerable families struggled to maintain their tenancies with Derby Homes and other social landlords. Some families ended up breaching their tenancies and ultimately being evicted from their homes. The council and Derby Homes then found these same families presenting as homeless and being in need of rehousing without the underlying issues being addressed. This housing merry-go-round was in no one's interest, not the families, not the neighbours, and not the council and other agencies from a funding viewpoint. FIP was a project which sought to address this underlying behaviour which impacts on the community, and in many ways FIP was successful and brought stability to families and addressed antisocial behaviour which spilled onto the streets. Mr. Mayor, the FIP project is a classic case of invest to save. By investing a small amount, this project will bring major savings to agencies because of the preventative nature of FIP's work. Of course, on top of that, the social benefits to families that have benefited from the support and advice of the Families Intervention Project has been immense. So, Mr. Mayor, on a number of measurable targets, the FIP can be seen to have succeeded in addressing the behaviour of a number of troubled families and providing good value for money for this council. And I would urge all members to support this motion and to support FIP to make sure that it gets the funding that it deserves.
Councillor Dinser.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I originally seconded Councillor Hillier's motion because I did believe that in addition to all the things that she said in detail, some of the changes in policy made by the current coalition government are going to have negative impact for exactly the type of families that the FIP was targeting and having positive results. So I did support it on that basis, but however, in order to achieve consensus and to have a way forward which is cross-party and hopefully from all members of the chamber here, I'm more than happy to accept the change and the amendment made by Councillor Carr. I actually work in the probation service and I have seen at first hand the positive impact that the Family Intervention Project has provided. It's been a centrally driven government initiative with the previous Labour government, and it, like most projects, is a way of testing out new innovative ways of working, and the FIP was innovative in terms of its multi-agency working, targeting the most troublesome families in city centres and urban areas and other parts of the country, like Derby City, and all the positive impacts that have been stated by fellow contributors previously, in terms of domestic violence and child protection being tackled, parenting problems and parenting lessons being delivered, improving the health and well-being, particularly registering people so that they're with GPs and dentists, and of course contributing to reducing offending within these families, against these families, and actually the antisocial behaviour in the local area. All positives, and I think this resolution is simple in terms of saying that all the positive learning points which projects like FIP highlight and demonstrate should not be lost. They should be used in a positive, constructive way, and whether there's rebadging going on or not, which troublesome families may be, the new word from the coalition for what the previous government identified as a problem issue. Irrespective of rebadging or not, let's learn the lessons, which I'm sure officers have on the ground, but let's not lose those lessons. Let's use them in a positive, constructive way, and within the constraints of financial limitations that we have at the moment, make the maximum use of those learning points. and ensure that the types of families that were targeted, identified and supported through the FIP project continue to be engaged with and outcomes improved, so that not only for those families and future generations in those families, their life is better, their health and well-being is better, but also in their neighbourhoods for others, it becomes a better, more conducive environment to live in. And I think many lessons from the FIP project show a way forward of how we can do that. Whether it's going to be rebadged as troublesome families or it's going to be rebadged as something else. Let's not the fact that the budget, overall budget for this sort of work has reduced, and there will have to be, better, more efficient ways of doing things. Let's not let that get in the way of actually benefiting from all the good evidence that's here. And the resolution, I think, still holds that view, and I think it's something that I commend to the Chamber, and I hope we get unanimous support for it. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Nater. I propose to make this the last speaker before Councillor Hillier sums up.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Mayor, I'll be brief about it. Yes, FIPS, they do a wonderful job, but I always still think there's always room for improvement. If the coalition government is putting an extra £448 million to deal with vulnerable families, then that should be welcomed. And if it's performance-led and target-led, surely that is a good thing to support people that are in need.
Councillor Hillier, do you want to sum up now?
Well, I'd just like to stress that the £448 million that's been put in for the targets, yes, but it's not, the scope of FIP, if you listen to what I said, is actually slightly different. It does actually encompass a wider remit to that of tackling troubled families. And, there is a danger that it will thing. But I do support the work of FIP, and I think it's really the impact of tackling troubled families. Although it could be integrated in there, it's just really to say that we need to be careful and cautious, and we need to ensure that there are no gaps left behind in integrating both these pieces of work, if that is the way forward. Thank you.
Those in favour of the substantive motion indicate now, please. That's clearly carried with cross-party support. Thank you. Councillors, can I thank you for your forbearance with our microphone difficulties today, and I declare the meeting closed.